Taliban control. The district governor has been airlifted out of Sangin, and the Taliban says its flag is flying at full mast. More than 100 British troops died there over a 4-year period, and now British military advisers are involved in the operation to fight off the Taliban, though they won't take part in any combat. The acting Defence Minister, Mohammed Massoum Stanakzai, put part of the blame and the setback on NATO countries for pulling their combat forces out of Afghanistan a year ago.
I'm not saying they left us too soon. They left us in a way they rushed it. It could have been more gradual. It could have been on the basis of how our capacity, our capabilities can develop, and then we were up to the job.
Well, the foreign policy think tank, the Henry Jackson Society, says we took our eye off the ball thinking the job in Afghanistan had been completed when it clearly hadn't. And its chief executive, Dr Alan Mendoza, joins me now. Good evening.
Good evening.
So you clearly believe the same then as the Afghan Defence Minister?
Well, look, I think it's the case that we rushed to leave Afghanistan before time. We should have stayed for longer to make sure that security had been guaranteed. The same has been true in Iraq, of course, as well. And sadly, you're now seeing the effect of that unseemly rush to the exit.
How long do you think we should have stayed, though? Because, they have managed for 2 years to fight off the Taliban.
No, of course they have, and I think credit where credit is due. I think the Afghan Defence Forces have done a lot better than what many of their critics would have imagined when we originally left. But I think what, of course, is absent in Afghanistan still is a political solution with the Taliban, and there was a strong argument for suggesting that we really ought to have stayed until such point as the Taliban either knew they were defeated or were ready to compromise in some way in a political solution to ensure that the country was stable going forwards.
Do you think it is possible in Afghanistan to achieve that?
Yes, look, I think so. I think there have been illustrations in the past couple of years of opportunities where that could have arisen already. I think, unfortunately, though, now that they have their tails up once again, they'll be encouraged to believe that a military solution and victory is possible. And we can't allow that, of course. We've spent many years fighting the Taliban, and, of course, let's not forget the rise of Islamic radicalization everywhere else in the Middle East as well. It would send entirely the wrong message for us to allow this victory to stand, and I hope we will be providing as much support as possible to the Afghan government.
What kind of support should we be providing at the moment? Not combat troops, should we be?
Well, initially, of course, we've sent in advisors, and I think, as always, you have to do these things in increments. You have to see if minimal intervention is possible, but if necessary, I think we ought to be prepared to say that in an extreme case, we ought to defend our allies, the Afghan government, if we're requested to, which I imagine we might well be, to assist them in that way.
The thing is, where do you stop? You've got Afghanistan, you've got Libya, you've got Syria, you've got Iraq. You can't obviously put troops everywhere.
No, but there are differences in these cases. If you have a government inviting you in, as the Iraqi government did, for example, to strike ISIS, that's a very different case in point than cases like Syria, where you had to debate and discuss that very carefully in Parliament as to whether we should or could go in to attack ISIS without that sort of advance welcome from the government. Libya, again, falls into the latter category. It's unlikely we'd be invited in that way in Libya. So I think you have to look at each separate case separately and judging on the local circumstances.
How worried are you about what we're seeing now in Sangin?
Well, of course it's concerning. You've got the Taliban resurgent, Taliban flags flying, reports that the local governors are leaving. It's concerning given we know the history of the place, how much blood was spilt to gain control in the first place and keep control. To see that lost is obviously a huge problem.
What kind of strategy should we have to tackle radical Islam?
Well, that's a massive question. And internationally, it's a long-term fight, a long-term discussion. I think the Prime Minister has made that clear in his own assessment of that problem. I think, there's a military component, obviously, but the military component will not solve the problems in any of these countries, and it won't solve the ideological problem either. If you're looking short-term, yes, you can shore up positions with military support. Longer term, you can look at political solutions and a bid to ensure that participatory democracies emerge, where everyone has a stake and everyone feels satisfied. But long-term, you can't win this battle until the Muslim world itself decides that the moderates in the Muslim world win that battle internally internally. And that's going to take a long time, given the amount of money and support that radicalism has had.
Alan Mendoza, thank you for that.